Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, because we know people are joining us from the different part of the world. My name is Pradeep Naik. I'm at the University of Waterloo, and I'm also part of the Vulnerability to Viability Global Partnership for building strong small-scale fisheries, and I will be facilitating this webinar today. So I would start with a few rounds of introductions before we get to hear the talk for today. Um, the first introduction would be to the Vulnerability to Viability Global Partnership, and then I will introduce the thematic webinar series, and I will introduce our speaker, at which time then we'll listen to the talk. So just as an introduction, Vulnerability to Viability Global Partnership is a transdisciplinary research and knowledge and action network with over 100 members from Asia, Africa, and Canada, and also internationally. The goal of the global partnership is to support small-scale fisheries in their transitions between vulnerability to viability. And the way we understand vulnerability and viability is not just in economic sense, but also to reflect all aspects of human lives that encompasses, the political, the cultural, the environmental, ecological, and all other aspects. Our focus is on co-creation and co-production of knowledge through our research and case studies in different parts of the world. We are also working on building a repository or an information system where to hold the co-produced knowledge. We are also developing multifaceted capacity right from the community to the academia to policy and practice world. We are engaged in synthesizing and integrating the knowledge in a way that can inform the governance and policy work, but also engaging in knowledge mobilization, knowledge dissemination in multiple ways. The B2B Global Partnership aims to identify the diverse factors and conditions contributing to the vulnerability of small-scale fisheries and encourage and engage collaboratively with small-scale fisheries communities and other civil society, NGOs, and university partners to enhance small-scale fisheries viability. We are conducting transdisciplinary, community-engaged, policy-driven research in 6 countries in Asia. That includes Bangladesh, India, Indonesia, Japan, Malaysia, and Thailand. In 6 countries in Africa, that includes Ghana, Malawi, Nigeria, Senegal, South Africa, and Tanzania. In doing so, the B2B Global Partnership brings people and organizations together across physical, cultural, and disciplinary boundaries through a shared interest in addressing global change impacts on small-scale fisheries. The B2B thematic webinar series, for which we have virtually gathered here today, is an initiative of the B2B Global Partnership to facilitate and generate high-level discussions on vulnerability and viability themes and topics within the context of small-scale fisheries. The goal is to feature academics, government representatives, practitioners, and members of the civil society who have made significant contributions to the theoretical, practical, and policy aspects of small-scale fisheries, both locally and globally. The B2B thematic webinar series takes place on the last Friday of every month, and there are some months like this month where there are deviations because of the availability of the speaker and, managing the time. And it will continue to be so during the entire year of 2025. The series is available internationally through live streaming on YouTube. Details regarding this series will be available on our website, www.b2bglobalpartnership.org. Today's webinar is the 7th in the series of B2B thematic webinars planned for the year 2025 and the 55th since January 2021 when it all started. And it is my privilege to introduce Dr. Amalendu Jyotishi as our distinguished speaker today. Dr. Amalendu Jyotishi is a professor and associate director at the School of Development, Azim Premji University, Bangalore in India. Amalendu works on issues relating to natural resources and institutions on the one hand and innovation, entrepreneurship in information technology and business on the other. His research portfolio includes natural resources and institutions from a broader institutional economics perspective, And a lot of that work is focused on the fisheries sector and especially small-scale fisheries. Dr. Jyotisi specializes in several areas through his research, which includes natural resource management in the commons, new institutional economics and legal pluralism, ecosystem and livelihood issues, agriculture and development economics, economics and ecological history, and urban food and security and malnutrition. Again, a lot of that work is related to the fisheries. He is one of the core research members of Asian Initiative on Legal Pluralism and was the coordinator of the group during the period 2012 to 2015. And he has been an executive committee member of Indian Society for Ecological Economics. His current portfolio of research interest includes fish for food security, dried fish value chain, subsistence economic models, and the commons. Dr. Jyotisi is a well-published scholar with 2 books to his credit and over 40 research papers published in journals and as book chapters, apart from several conference papers and proceedings and popular articles and book reviews. He is also an active participant and member of the V2B Global Partnership. It is my honor today to invite Dr. Amalendu Jyotisi to deliver today's talk for the V2B thematic webinar series July 2025. And the title of his talk is going to be Dispossession in the Coastal Space, Pathways from Vulnerability to Viability. And thank you very much, Amalendu, for making time today. And the floor is yours now.
Thank you so much, Pradeep, I find this as a privilege and honor for me to be part of this forum and really feel honored that you invited me to be part of this this webinar series and allowed me to deliver on a topic that interests me quite a bit, and at the same time, it also I felt that it's very useful for the series that you have been holding together. So over the next 45 minutes or so, what I would be trying to do is taking you through this work and this work that we have been doing. Largely, it would kind of what I would do is that I will take you through the cases that we have been working large, and my focus largely has been in Indian coast and specifically in Karnataka coast, where I have been engaged for last decade or so. And so my narratives and findings are coming from this particular space or field, where I would try to impress you on how these fish and ecological dispositions and fish and livelihood dispositions and food and nutrition dispositions are kind of manifested in different forms in the coast, in the marine scape. And also, I'll not leave you there. I would like to take you through a process that where there is a possibility, there is a hope that we can move in a pathway which is more desirable and perhaps more sustainable and addresses some of these particular issues. And this decade of work comes from a variety of people who have been part of this activity. It started in early 2015-16, that when we started working on fish for food as a project supported by NWO from Netherlands, and we were working in India and Ghana. Subsequent to that, we worked on a kind of long-term project called dried fish matter, the social economy of dried fish, where again, number of partners who are engaged. So many of these ideas were part of these deliberations that happened in some of these cohorts and groups. And subsequent to that, we had a Indian Ocean Collaborative, where 5 members from 5 different countries joined together. It was during the COVID time that we worked together. And also the currently running small fish and climate change project that we are working in Africa, west coast of Africa, the Lake Victoria region, and west coast of India. So the pointers, the ideas, a lot of these things came from numerous deliberations that we have among ourselves. Also, through our writings and reading, and what we observed in our field with the engagement with the community, with this space. So that's what I am going to take you through. Just to set the context that I'm sure those who are working on the small scale fisheries related issues, broadly they may be aware of the points, but very recently there's a few that came up with a kind of snapshots around articulating the importance of small scale fisheries, and number of people who have been working on these issues that includes the V2V partnership and TBTI partnership, which are some of the strongest voices for small-scale fisheries. So we know the magnitude of the small-scale fisheries, and this snapshot broadly gives us some kind of idea about how what is their numbers. The numbers are mind-boggling at some point of time. There are about 477 million women who are engaged in this and activity, and the number of people who are directly engaged in the fisheries activities are significantly high, and they produce almost half of nearly 40% of the total fish that is being produced, and a significant portion of small scale fish goes into feeding the desirable in the local economy to the poor, and that's why it plays an important role and quite often neglected the role of women in this particular space. So what I'll do is that while emphasizing on the small scale fisheries and for those who are kind of new to this kind of space, they can look at the four figures, and the top two are essentially showing different kinds of small scale boats which are motorized or non-motorized, and below we are seeing trawlers and personals of different kinds, which we call as large scale fish boats. When we talk about small scale fisheries, largely we look at the fishing activities and gears which uses boats which are non-motorized or motorized boats, or even those who don't use boats but directly get into the water and do fishing activities. It's in the coastal space or estuarine space where they catch their fish using different kinds of nets and gears. So my focus is largely around the small scale fishes and fishes which include both men and women. Men most often who engage in directly fishing activities, and women most often engaged in fish processing and trading activities. And while going through this process, explaining different narratives from Karnataka, I would try to impress on both men and women in some ways, and how these dispositions are kind of manifesting in different forms. And at the same time, I'll try to show you some possible pathways or experiment that is being done, and how we can re-emphasize on some of those pathways. And India, particularly, those who are not aware of India, the fisheries sector had different kinds of phases. And in 1960s around, we saw mechanization of fisheries started happening, and this sector was seen as one of the sectors that can earn a significant amount of foreign currency for us. And the coast and the marine scape was the space available to capture as much as fish as possible through better technology, and with that we can export it more and earn more foreign currency. And with this became one part of the growth story of India's fisheries sector. Subsequent to that, we saw uh, uh, around 2000, we saw a kind of booming of commercial aquaculture. Largely, we call it shrimp culture that happened in the coastal areas, and that became one of the largest foreign exchange earner for India. And uh, in 2020 onwards, Government of India, in fact, came up with a particular blue economic policies, and there are a lot of debates that is happening around that. There are activities which are relating to specifically boosting fisheries sector and especially marine and coastal fisheries scale. So, and in this transition, what we are seeing is that there is a significant growth of freshwater fishery that has happened, and the other marine fish, particularly aquaculture, has also played a very important role. But small pelagic fishes, which are also equally important in many ways for food and nutrition security or from the affordability perspective, it has been kind of moving in a fluctuating. It has been largely there has been a fluctuations around that, right? And probably even if you see, even if you try to see that what is the kind of transition that has taken place in terms of in these three phases over a long period of time, you'll see that the large-scale fisheries which were introduced in 1960 had a minuscule portion, a proportion to compare to the total fish production. The total fish production you can see in terms of height of these pies, and two sides shows the pies of large scale fishery. The dark one is large scale fishery and the bright one is small scale fisheries. So what the narrative is that over a long period of time, large scale fisheries is producing more fishes, and but there are lesser people. Whereas in small scale fisheries, there are more people and they are getting a proportionately lesser share of fish. And this itself also impacts in terms of the earnings for the small scale fishers household. And it's not surprising that some of the census results show that numerous, a significant proportion of small scale fisheries, fishers households are below poverty line. So, so how these dispositions manifest in different forms. So for this, what we did actually is this doesn't come from a one particular study or one particular activity that we did. It comes from an engagement that we had over the last decade or so, understanding small scale fisheries activities in the Karnataka coast, which form basically three districts, which are the coastal districts of Karnataka, which is part of the west coast of India and part of Arabian Sea of the larger Indian Ocean region. And Karnataka is interesting state because the numerous blue economy development models and the investments are coming in different parts of Karnataka. And if you see the northern part of Karnataka, which we call Uttar Kannada, is largely small scale fisher dominated by small scale fishers, but new policies are coming in that space. The other two districts, Dakshin Kannada and Udupi, where some amount of industrialization had already happened in the initial phase itself, and we see a significant proportion of large-scale fishes. And there are about 9 harbors across this coast, 9 major harbors, and there are several beach landings, about 100 of those in this space. Still, small-scale fishers, in terms of numbers, dominate this space. So I'm going to take you through the different forms, how these dispositions are being manifested through pictures and through other kinds of narratives. So to start with and when I'm talking about this ecological livelihood or food and nutrition disposition, these are not isolated case or not separate cases. They are strongly intertwined with each other. So ecological issues manifest in livelihood issues manifest in food and nutrition issues, and that's one point that we need to keep in mind. Uh, so I'll take you through some of this this development that is happening in Karnataka in recent years, particularly in last 4 or 5 years, that we have specifically engaged in understanding some of these dispositions in a more meaningful, nuanced way. So to start with, one of the interesting space we started our work was in the coastal Uttar Kannada districts, a place called Honavar. Here, a river called Saravati, which drains into Arabian Sea. And coastal erosion and accretion are part of the dynamism of coastal ecosystem. But adjacent to that, around 20 kilometers away from this, there is called another river called Aganashini, which drains into Arabian Sea. The difference between these two rivers is that the Saravati river is dammed, whereas Aganashini is one of those rare rivers which is undammed. And following the damming of that river, we saw there are significant change that happened to this particular space. The river started moving more northward. And if you look at these two pictures in the from Google Map, one from 1992 and another from 2019, you will find that there is a specific area which was accreted. So when this area was created, initially it was used by fishers to dry their fish, and fish drying activity was quite significant. About 15 to 20 large traders and several workers who are involved in this particular activities were present in this particular space. But the space in recent time was given out to a company called Honavar Port Private Limited, which initiated construction of a port in this particular place. And so the question arises that when one bank of the river there is accretion is happening, the other side of the river there is erosion happening. When erosion happens, people lose their land, lose their space where they have been engaged in different kind of activities. But when the accretion happens, who owns that particular land, and what kind of activity it is given for? And this is where we see that this accreted land, in a broader framework of blue economic policy, what we see is that it is going towards the activities which can perhaps generate more economic values, but little that we care about what happens to the different kinds of livelihood that can be affected by this. And this line of the bridge, that is a good reference point for us to understand that this about 70 acres of land that was created is recently given to the Honavar Port Private Limited, who have been building a port there, but also they need approach road, they need variety of other things, and that creates other sets of problems. This is something little may sound little out of place for the time being, but as I kind of go ahead, you will find that the stories are quite intertwined and connected. What has happened in, as I said, the second phase of around 2000, that shrimp aquaculture started gaining significance in India, and India is one of the largest producer and exporter of shrimp, and maybe competing with Ecuador and Vietnam. And in recent years, it has been increasing significantly at a higher rate, and it has been earning a significant foreign exchange for us as well. It's about $5 billion, and which we intend to increase. The blue economic policy says that we intend to increase it further. And what happens when we kind of put much of this land into for shrimp aquaculture? One thing is that there are enough studies that have been suggesting that the salinity level in this particular area increases. Some of these lands are largely in the deltas. For example, the Andhra Pradesh coast, in the east coast, where Godavari Delta is one of the largest delta, and where shrimp culture has taken quite a large scape of it, and which was at some point of time one of the large producer of paddy and rice cultivation that was happening there. Now it has a lot of these areas have been converted into shrimp aquaculture. And once a shrimp aquaculture farm comes adjacent to that, it is very difficult for somebody to do paddy cultivation due to salinity of the land. Not only that, there are other studies also suggested that what kind of labor being engaged in these activities. Aquaculture largely depends on male migrant labor who have been working in this space. Whereas for paddy cultivation, the labor that was used was largely local, and most of them are women. So the replacement of labor that is happening also is has a kind of a significant gender nuance. So numerous women labor are getting replaced for the male labor, migrant male labor, and both of them are precarious. So when we are even imagining kind of a policy, one has to also think about it that how to, it's not which precarity is better than which other precarity, but how to address, find a right kind of balance between different forms of precarity. And what happens with this shrimp is that shrimp eats fish, and for this, with this growth of shrimp, there has been a boom in fish meal, fish oil production in India. Karnataka, particularly the Dakshin Kannada coast, has been one of the concentrated cluster of fish meal, fish oil production. So, and that's where Karnataka matters quite a bit, because for all the shrimp, what we need is a significant amount of fish. And from where this fish comes from, and most of this fish comes from the large scale boats. So, like this photograph shows you that. And in numerous interaction with these trawlers, purseners, and large scale boat owners that we had conversation across Karnataka coast, we found that almost 40 to 50% of their harvest of small size fishes, including mackerels, Indian oil sardine, which is one of the prize catch for them, those go to the fish meal factories, largely in a place called Ullal near Mangalore. So, and this photograph also suggests a similar kind of things. So, the value chain of it is interesting, that small fishes, particularly mackerel and Indian oil sardine, which goes to fish meal factories. From fish meal factory, it goes to aquafeed farms. From aquafeed farm, it goes to shrimp farms, and then shrimp is exported. So one has to understand the value chain of this shrimp, not only the shrimp value chain, not only from the economic perspective, it is also equally important to understand how it may have a nutritional impact in certain ways. And in that sense, the ecological, livelihood, and nutritional aspects are not separated, rather they are intertwined. And what is the price at which they are selling this small fishes to the fish meal factories? It's about 27 rupees per kg. A couple of years back when we looked at, and last year also when we are talking to people, the prices were around this. Whereas when it is sold, and recently when I was in Netherlands and in Albert Heijn's market, if you go and see the white leg or venomized shrimp, the price is converting it into Indian rupees with from euros, you find that it is sold at this price. Even this price is not necessarily affordable for a average European consumer. So which means it's the small affordable fishes are getting converted via fish meal to shrimp for a kind of a affordable consumer of the countries where this shrimp is destined. So this is a complex value chain, and this has repercussions on how this nutrition export that takes place. and Karnataka remains one of the largest hub of fish meal, fish oil production. So broadly, what we see is that in this process, what is happening is that in the sea, there is a competition. There are a large number of small-scale fishes getting a lesser share of fish. There is small number of proportionately smaller number of large-scale fishes, and who get a major share of it. A majority of large-scale fishes send their fish to the fish meal, fish oil factories. So what is happening is that what was considered as bycatch at some point of time has become part of the target catch, and it again further creates different kinds of ecological issues and problems in the sea, because numerous large-scale fishes are competing to get enough fish from the sea, and varieties of illegal practices, which is illegal in Indian policies, including light fishing, bottom trawling, bull trawling, all those destructive form of fishing practices are generally taken up by the large scale fishers, because they have to remain viable in running their large scale boats. It's necessary for them that they get into this kind of practices and get this fish so that they can sell it to the fish meal, fish oil industry. So this photograph is also from one of those factories that allowed us to go inside and take some kind of photos there. And in the process, small-scale fishes are not the one who are producing enough bycatches. Their fish production that happens largely goes for fish for food, whereas a significant proportion of fish produced by large-scale fisher goes to fish meal and goes as feed and as a shrimp, which is exported. The other form of changes that is happening is this in the coastal and estuarine space is the estuarine areas. Now we see numerous cage culture that has come up. And this in these cages, we are growing sea bass. Sea bass is another carnivorous species. And in the second picture, you can see that the sea basses are fed with mackerel. These mackerels are food variety mackerels, which are being fed to the sea bass. The two sets of problem again is that this mackerel, which would have been a affordable small fish, goes into feeding sea bass, which is again exported. Second thing that it creates is that these cages are creating private spaces within a commons. These commons are being used by bivalve collectors. A large number of them are women. There are different kinds of crabs and other kinds of fish species in being collected and caught by the small scale fishers, and with their small boats or without boats with their nets, and now creating this private space in this common actually creates certain kinds of conflicts that which small scale fishers can't use that kind of space. And this form is again another way that it kind of alienates large number of small men and women fishers accessing these estuarine areas for their livelihood and fishing activities. The ports which are being built or large fishing harbors which are being built, and Karnataka government with the blue economic policies, a good number of ports and harbors are being planned. When being planned, and the harbors that you would see, that look at this particular picture and look at the platform of this harbor, fishing harbor, which is in Honavar. And this platform height is such that only large scale boats can access this platform. And if you have to see the small scale boats, they are outside this platform area. So one is that small scale fishers and the policy, the making this harbor, the design of this harbor and all that are not keeping the small scale fishers in mind. And these are designed for the large scale fishers. This is not the only problem that they cannot access the fishing harbors to land their fish, But also along with that, they lose out numerous other benefits they could have got from that particular space, because there are traders who are coming to this harbors to buy fishes. There are other agents who are coming to buy fishes, and small scale fishers are losing out from being part of that particular business. So that's another form that we see that the design of this platform itself also is creating another form of differences, and which are in some sense dispossessing the small scale fishers, and particularly aligned with the interest of the large scale fish. And the areas where harbors and ports are being built, also along with that comes is different kinds of infrastructure. Road infrastructure is one of those things. And when the road infrastructure comes, these are the spaces where the small scale fisher, particularly women, were engaged in drying their fishes. And with the movement of vehicles, with dust and all other kinds of problems, it is becoming increasingly difficult for these women to access this space. Even if one is that the road has taken most part of their spaces, and even if some space is left for them, it's becoming difficult for them to dry their fish in this particular space, because of dust and other kind of pollutant that can come into to their fish, and it would have an impact on the prices of their fish and trading and marketing of it. So this blue economy related development in terms of ports, harbors, and along with that the road and other kind of network that comes in, also in some sense excluding the small scale fishes, specifically the women engaged in dried fish activities. And in many places in India, there are ecotourism beaches are coming. Sea coasts are also known for tourist places, and tourism is also is promoted in this coastal areas. And in India, particularly, there are about 26 something called blue flag beaches, the ecotourism places which got blue flag certification, and such numbers are going to increase over the period of time. In Karnataka itself, there are two such ecotourism places, and what it does is, in one way, it creates some kind of enclosure, and these enclosures are essentially for the tourists who come into this place. They have to buy a ticket to get inside that particular place. And to keep that particular space clean, what we see also is that the dumps that come to the other side of the this tourism place, and this so it's a form of it's not that we are necessarily taking care of kind of sustainable tourism in a particular way. It is just shifting the burden from one side to the other side. The other side of the beach is generally used by the small scale fishers, and they have to now negotiate with different kinds of pollutants that is coming into their space, where they were otherwise engaged in landing their small boats and drying their fishes, etc. And not only this ecotourism beaches, but also tourism itself has grown significantly in the coastal areas. Along with that, what comes also is different kinds of hotels and resorts, and these have also increased the amount of effluent and pollutant that is being kind of thrown into the sea. The immediate brunt is comes to the small scale fishers, largely to the women who are engaged more in this coastal space. So the tourism activities is also already shrinking the space. And this particular photograph that we have taken is a place called Karwar in North Uttar Kannada district, in the northern part of Karnataka. And they had a larger space where they used to do fish drying. One side we have a beach called Tagore Beach, which is quite a famous tourist place. And the other side of it, there are hotels and resorts which have come up. Now, these women are squeezed between these two places, and at the same time, the government officials and tourists and others don't see dried fish as a livelihood activity that should sustain juxtaposed to tourism activities. For them, fish stinks, and this is something is not appropriately positioned in the tourism place. But these women have been putting up their voice together, fighting for their cause, and continue to sustain in this particular place, and have been engaging in fish drying activities. Karwar market, the Sunday market of Karwar, is one of the largest dried fish market, and they have been engaged in this particular activity even now. But we don't know how long they can sustain this struggle when a larger pressure comes from tourism and hotel and resort. So this is again squeezing the space for the small scale fishers. So through these different kinds of narratives, what we see is that the three things that we identified is that the space for small scale fishes is getting squeezed, and which is directly impacting the livelihood uh, of them, and particularly for women. There are ecological disturbance that is happening and the fish meal, which has been driving certain kind of things, which includes different kinds of bottom trawling and bull trawling, light fishing, and those kind of practices, which is triggered by fish meal factories and shrimp export. That is also leading to kind of unsustainable, ecologically unsustainable practices in the sea. And small fishes, small affordable fishes are being fed to in this fed into this feed value chain, and hence are less and less available for consumers who can afford to buy small fishes. So small fishes are not being affordable, and the prices of those are also increasing. We have also seen in recent times that Indian oil sardine, which was a prize catch by the fish meal factories, we saw the collapse of Indian oil sardine in the last 7 years. And slowly we are seeing the revival of it happening, but the revival is not coming to the same level as the catch that was happening prior to the collapse of it. So we could see this all the forms of dispositions intertwinedly visible in this particular coastal space of Karnataka. And this is a story across many of the coast, not only in India, many other countries as well. So, what is the possible pathways to kind of the knowing that there are different kind of vulnerability, and which kind of is put on to the small scale fishers for none of their wrongs. So how should we find a way forward to address these vulnerabilities? One is that the blue economic policy in Indian context that we see, or even in this, because it is a federal structure, there are state also have their fisheries policies. In most of the states or the national policies, we don't see mention or recognition of small scale fisher and policies oriented towards them. Women are broadly missing in this entire policy dimension. Their activities are not recognized, which including processing, drying, and trading. And these women are just not engaged in a livelihood, but also carry a spirit of entrepreneurship. And when what we are doing is either we are removing them from the enterprise spirit, making some of them as wage laborer, or totally removing most of them out of the economic activities and space. Hence, the concerns for the women are much more larger. So, recognizing them in these policies becomes another important part of it. And third way to look at it is the collectivization of small scale fisher as well as women engaged in fisheries value chain. This is where these global networks like the global networks like TBTI, too big to ignore. These networks are very important players, and at national level and subnational level also, we need to find ways where we can collectivize these small scale fishers using some of the available policies through which they can organize themselves. But most important and third, the last most important point is, I would say, is that a significant amount of fish is going towards feed and not necessarily going towards food, and how to correct that relation. And one of the hope comes from is that sending the fish, small fish, where it is needed most. And uh, my proposition would be to send it to through the state initiated programs. In India already has state initiated programs through Anganwadi, or what is called ICDS, Integrated Child Development Schemes, where not only children below 0 to 3 years, 3 to 6 years, but also adolescent girls, lactating mothers, pregnant mothers are targeted through this program, and several different kinds of food packets or food is being served through these programs. There are midday meal programs in the school. In some states, even breakfast is also been introduced. There are social welfare hostels where state-initiated hostels where people live in those places. There are community kitchens and urban canteens which are functioning, which are run by the state. So, in this spaces, is there a way that we have been providing different kinds of nutrition? And is there a way that fish can also reach to those kind of places? And there are examples existing in at least some experiments that is being done. I'll take you through that, some of that in a while. And why it is so important? Because India, if you look at as a country, and recent data from National Family Health Survey or Demographic and Health Survey database, you will find that almost 50% of women are anemic. Uh, 25% of children are stunted or wasted. And these are signs of significant or acute malnutrition. And for this, fish can play a very important role to provide adequate nutrition to the people. And this is one of the experiment that was being done in one of the orphanage, where orphan children, destitute women, and old age people stay. It's near Bhubaneswar, a place called Pepili, and small dried fish were kind of given part of meal. And my observation was that both the cooks as well as the children, they liked the fish. But a significant step was by Odisha government and World Fish when they joined together to think about fish-based nutrition in supplementary nutrition program. And a pilot was run in a tribal-dominated district of Mayurbhanj in Odisha, where dried fish and fish powder was part of the pilot program, which was given through this Anganwadi or ICDS program. And about 50 Anganwadi centers with 1,200 children below 6 years, 800 pregnant and lactating women, and adolescent girls were given with dried fish-based food items. And the study, the pilot study was also kind of observed very closely, and there are surveys which was taken up at the baseline, in the midline, and the end line, and it was taken up by organization called MS Swaminathan Research Foundation, based in Chennai, and they found that it is the small dried fish as well as fish powder is accepted by children as well as the lactating mothers and adolescent girls. So this experiment in a sense was quite successful. But however, from pilot state, it didn't reach to a kind of a universal state in this particular experiment. But the experiment itself throws a lot of promises. And if states take interest, and in number of cases states do take interest, if we can push for that, then this is one way that we can change the direction of fish from feed to food, and small fish can reach for to the place where it is needed most. And the another experiment that is being taken up by government of Assam, and it is also running in a pilot phase, and for last 3 years almost. And the results that I am hearing from that space is that it is being liked, and state is also trying to promote it. What we need to see is that that how it can be scaled up. And this gives me a significant amount of hope that everything is not lost, though the precarity of small-scale fishers and women is increasingly visible through different kinds of blue economic activities. But redirecting the policies towards fish for food would possibly have a significant impact on taking us from fish for feed to fish for food. And that is where I see this viability is coming up and significant hopes being there. So I'll stop here and thank you for listening to me. Maybe I don't know how did I take more time or less time. And thank you so much for listening through me.
Thank you very much, Amrita. That was those case examples are really wonderful in terms of hearing the different forms of dispossession that is taking place on the Indian Ocean, Arabian Sea coast of India. And the way you kind of coupled the three ecological livelihoods and food and nutrition as spaces where dispossession is taking place also leads us to think in terms of how dispossession is very specific to certain activities and sectors uh, related to small scale fisheries, and therefore the attention to those particular sectors or sectors can help address the dispossession question itself. Um, so if I can just kickstart by asking one question with regard to that main theoretical proposition that you have, and then we have a number of questions that are also coming from the audience that will go there. Okay, and we have enough time to get into those discussions. Um, if you could just lead the your presentation to so how do you frame the disposition around these three areas: ecological dispositions and livelihoods, and and food and nutrition. And of course, you had examples from aquaculture, you had examples from malnutrition and other things. So what is the framing of that? So because disposition is, it might seemingly be in one particular area, but this kind of is always seen as dissipating into other areas. Disposition is an ongoing process. And you say that in your presentation because you talked about 1960s, 2000 and 2020, and disposition taking new forms, and shapes and sizes. So what is the theoretical framing around that? How do you understand disposition from your examples as a integrated concept?
Thank you so much, Pratibha. And that's a very important question. And I would also direct people to look at the recent paper that we have published in Maritime Studies. It also has some more significant part of the writing there. But the idea of this accumulation by dispositions comes from David Harvey's work. But his work, if, as you know, is largely based in the urban scape, and where we see the way the dispositions being seen there is different. But having that broader idea of that how capital plays a role and how it displaces different livelihood in different forms, and also how you see this is its implications are seen in ecosystem or the seascape, as well as in the even in the land where the aquaculture activity is happening. At the same time, in the broader sense, you can see it how it is happening in food and nutrition. When you understand the value chain part of it, then you can identify that it is just not that it is happening in this particular space, but it is kind of spreading in a much more significant way. And it is not that community directly being there, but the dispositions are also visible elsewhere. Like, for example, when you understand that a significant portion of dried fish in from the coast, apart from coast, it is being eaten in the tribal areas and plantation areas, and largely by the tribal communities and the plantation workers, then you know that what happens if that fish is not available to them. And what impact it would have to the food and nutrition security of these people, what is that affordable substitute they can have for them. So the dispositions goes to that particular space also. But prior to Harvey's work, in fact, Harvey's work itself was influenced by somebody called Lefebvre, who talked about social production of space, and French writing largely, but available in English as well. This space there, that's the kind of thing actually impressed me when I was looking at this or explaining these narratives to you. I was trying to show the scape or space to you, and through that space, you are trying to see, at least trying to relate how the different kinds of changes and dispositions are happening, what is impacting whom. And in his idea of social production of space, he talked about how not only how we perceive space, but also how we conceive space, and what is this lived space or lived reality of the space means. And the changes in that are quite significantly visible in certain ways. Like when a port comes or a harbor comes, what happens to somebody, or the river changes its course from one direction to other direction. So a created land happens, what happens there? The land that is submerging in the sea, what happens there? So you can relate with this concept of perceived space, conceived space, and lived space interacting with the community there. I think this particularly the social production of space was the most important influencer for me to imagine this broader disposition. And then obviously Harvey's work later helped me to kind of position it in a coastal space and going away from urban space.
Yeah, and the changing nature of the disposition itself, if you're talking about 1960s, probably you're looking at a fishing community at that point in time, so it is leading to disposition of the, people that possess something.
Yeah.
But in this, happy, 5 decades of, developments, what you are probably seeing is the disposition of the dispossessed, so the nature of the things are changing, and therefore the very nature of disposition is also changing. So we're really dealing with a very very problematic situation where we're talking about disposition of the dispossessed, so and how to conceptualize that, so thank you. So
Yes.
we'll move on
Just to
to
add little more to it, I would say that, say, if we use a very fixed kind of lens to this, say for example, you say poverty and income poverty as a measure, you may not find this that it is visible to you in this way. If somebody who is not a fisher now going to doing fishing and becomes actually fish worker and still earning some level of wages for the subsistence of the household, but the transformation that takes place from an entrepreneur to a worker, that is a different kind of change that is happening. And secondly, it is just income doesn't see it, it can kind of put a line for you, but different forms of vulnerability that comes to you, that tomorrow something happens to you, your family, or your health, are you in a position to take care of that? So the vulnerability becomes a larger question rather than just seeing it in a line of poverty and in a particular format like income or those kind of format. So I think we need to expand those lens to, I mean, understand this disposition, and you rightly said so.
Yes, yeah, and the idea around, if there is disposition historically taking place, what are some of the mechanisms, what are some of the actions, and at all levels that can move this contexts towards a repossession, and what repossession means in those, politically and materially and other in other senses. I'm now going to move on to one of the questions that came from Ariola from Nigeria. And Ariola says, of course, thanks to you for your wonderful talk. And the question is, the gradual replacement of women from the value chain is of concern. Are they voluntarily moving to other forms of livelihoods, or are being forced out? That's first part of the question. And then the second part of the question is, how can the several injustices to small-scale fisheries, as enumerated in your talk, due to the construction of the harbor, be redressed more or so, and the resulting challenges affect women the most?
Very thanks for this very nice question. It's very difficult to say whether women are moving out of their livelihood voluntarily or by force. But as we engage more discussing with them, what we find also is that there is a pride associated with the activity they have been engaged in. It is the fish processing, getting the fish, processing the fish, and then taking and trading it. And there are different kinds of pathways they have to negotiate. It's just not weights and measures of the pathway, not only the transactional pathway, but also in a very patriarchal form of society, a very masculine form of market space. They have to engage in that space. So there are difficulties, but they still take a lot of pride in the kind of activity they have been doing. We through the Dried Fish Matters project, we did a kind of a survey also around that place, and found in 3 seasons actually, and found that most of these women traders have been saying that there is no dearth of demand. Their demand for their fish product is high. Particularly in monsoon season, it increases much more because fresh fish availability declines in some ways. And what they are seeing as a problem is the kind of getting right kind of fish or enough fish, and getting the fish space to process it. So these things are visible in what I presented, that how the space is shrinking for them. And with that, actually, a lot of them are moving out of this enterprise activities. Some of them becoming as workers in the like say when the stroller comes or the agents, they want to kind of separate the fish, some of the cleaning activities, but not all can be engaged in that. So some of them are engaging this. There is something, there is a term coined by a friend that was called calling the housewifeization of the fisherwomen that was happening. And what it means is that some of them are not moving away from this work as well. So we are seeing the changes actually happening across. In Kerala, in Karnataka, particularly, I have seen these kind of changes happening. Yeah. And yeah, so that was, I think, or did I miss out the second part of?
I mean, the blue economy part, now, how can small scale fisheries, remain in
Yeah.
place given the numerous challenges?
Yeah.
So, across your timeline and related to what
Yeah.
Ariola is asking, is over these 5 decades or 6 decades or more, 7 decades, we are seeing that the strategy and the type of drivers are also changing. Drivers of dispossession itself. Now we're talking about blue economy, which is a bigger, force. And very sophisticated force in terms of causing displacement and dispossession. So are there enough tools and strategies and mechanisms at the disposal of the small scale fishers to to respond to these sophisticated drivers that have changed over the past several decades? So from a simple policy change in 1960s to blue economy in 2020 is so um,
Yeah.
how do they deal with, how do they survive, and how do they persist? So uh, are there corresponding changes in the response mechanism of the
Yeah.
small scale fishers,
Yeah.
especially women,
Yeah.
that is taking place?
Yeah, I think it's happening in different format. Like say, if we take coastal erosion that is happening, um, some are getting compensated, and the compensated land is not near to the coast, somewhere else, and suddenly they are kind of totally displaced from their livelihood, and in a very different environment they have to live in. Some are even not getting the compensation as well. When the port and harbor, this kind of questions, when that comes, in some places, some instances, we have seen collectivization of people in the form of movement that is taking place. But this movement also have to kind of sustain in a way that they have to fight it in court of law. Enough documentation is not available to fight it in the court of law. And and not enough capital or money is there to even kind of sustain this fighting. And we see that they are losing out in that space as well. Honavar Port is a very interesting example where we saw some movements happening, but people also lost out in this space as well.
Yeah.
So, what is happening then? Some of them are turning into fish workers in some places where with either in the aquaculture farm or in the processing industries or with the agents sorting activities and those kind of or loading and unloading activities. But that's not where their pride lies. Their pride lies in something else that they have been doing together. Another way that is happening is that this Aganashini and Saravati two river example that I gave. The Saravati river is dammed, and after damming, there are a lot of changes that happened, including the salinity level. So what happened with that is that the bivalves, that the oysters type, that whatever that we know, shells, their availability dramatically declined. So with that, what happened? All other activities relating to calcium that or selling this oyster or bivalves in the market and those kind of activities that also reduced significantly, and a good number of these activities were done by women. I see that because I saw that in the other river, Aganashini, which is undammed, and still some level of bivalves are available. And not only these calcium factories are there where people are working, there are also salt production happen. There are some salt pans are also there where people are working in those spaces. So many of these traditional livelihoods are displaced through one side the human-induced ecological change, you can say it is anthropogenic in certain ways, but also the natural form of ecological changes that is happening, but more significantly with the blue economic investment related activities that is taking place. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and just 2 points, that is emerging from this discussion is we're not only seeing one set of one driver, we're seeing a very synergistic effect of drivers, various drivers playing out. And blue economy is a bright example, in a negative sense, of how multiple drivers act together. So we're seeing aquaculture, we're seeing ports, we are seeing energy, we are seeing mining and so all ecotourism and other things playing together, and therefore the sum total of the impact is heavier. And then the other element that you also mentioned about the privatization of the commons, we're seeing dispossession of things that is controversial. Commons belong to everyone, commons don't belong to anyone. So you're talking about dispossession in the commons, which is very hard to uh, establish in terms of ownership, in terms of entitlements, because commons are very fluid in that sense. So dispossession from the commons is a very controversial thing, and especially very hard to legally challenge even. So we're seeing these contested spaces changing drastically and therefore becoming more dynamic and becoming more political and with endless politics. Therefore
Absolutely.
the challenges ahead in this disposition discussion are really, really,
And
prevalent.
policies are not helping in this process also. For example, if we had some policies called Coastal Regulation Zone Act, CRZ Act, and up to 200 meters of high tide areas should not be allowed for other kinds of development activities. From 200 meters, it has come down to 50 meters. I think it may go down to minus also at some point of time. So what it means is that different kinds of hotels, resorts, and all kinds of things can come up in those kind of places. In look at the blue economic policies, just control F and try to see small scale fisher, dried fish, all those terms that you try to use and see how much you are getting. But you can even use sustainable development goal, and you may find that there is a lot of things are there written around it, but no things for the small scale fishers. And fish processing means it is the export oriented ice factory type of things, but not salting and drying.
Yeah, and which really requires, after despite so many decades and years of work, uh, in some sense, it requires to going back to the drawing board, like start to draw these connections and to understand these things, before you take any concrete action. One more question before we end. So this is from Sabrina Zaman, and Sabrina is asking, is viability even possible without fundamentally challenging the political economy driving these coastal transformations? So the very, the political economy space and activities that are taking place, where do we make the, who do we challenge is the question, I mean, it's easy to challenge some people, some actors, but it's not easy.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how do you do it? How do you, challenge the fundamental forces that are responsible for this disposition? And can we do anything, without challenging them, or if we challenge, how do we challenge,
I think academics are the last set of people where you can challenge and still feel safe about anything, but other spaces, challenging and feeling safe is becoming very difficult. So the last example that I got from Odisha's the fish feeding program, and Assam currently continuing with this program, was a bit of hope for me. It's difficult for us to make major changes to the policy space, though we can engage with that writing in media, or sometimes they recognize and you add those parts to it. It's a difficult negotiation that one has to go through that particular place. But here, what I'm seeing is that states are interested into reduce malnutrition. Some of these sustainable development goals are also there with them, and they're following it with the right kind of spirits, that okay, poverty reduction, hunger reduction, etc., that is there. So and my interaction with bureaucrats in Odisha government, and also the information that I gather from Assam, is that there is an interest that this kind of a successful program is helpful. So instead of challenging something to stop it, that let us stop fishmeal, let us stop trawlers, I think that is not going to work. And it's not an easy space that we can, by stopping trawler, we are also stopping the migrant laborers who are working in this kind of space. So there is a precarity associated with that. In fishmeal factory also people are working. So we can't start closing something which is bad, rather start something, open something which is good, and through let that force drive it in certain way. So my utopic imagination, if I have to see, that let the fish goes to this ICDS program and midday meal program. Many states may oppose it, but there are many states which will support to this idea, because a large part of the state community they eat fish, dried fish, and let that fish be procured by from the women dried fish processors in their cohort, their community, and let that come from small scale fisher. So that is the utopic imagination. One has to have that utopia to even to live with certain kind of hopes. So small scale fishers supplying the fish, small fishes largely, to the women group who are processing it, and it goes procured by the state and goes to this ICDS program, where women, children can be targeted, where we see the malnutrition and fish. And there is no second thought about that. That is the nature's superfood in terms of any kind of nutrient that we talk about. It just not protein, but all forms of micronutrient, omega-3 and vitamin B12 or whatever that you name, right?
yeah.
So that's the
Yeah.
hope path.
Yeah, no, and that really corresponds to something that we keep talking about in the context of our V2V research and engagements. Is, I mean, there is, you know, vulnerability and viability are not absolute. So at no point in time an entire system, say for example, small scale fisheries system in one place becomes either fully vulnerable or fully viable. There are elements within that system that become more viable and more vulnerable. So it is a continuous kind of process, and that requires continuous engagement. And same is the disposition piece that you are talking about. So um, if they were completely dispossessed, they would not exist by now. So that means there are dispossession taking place. At the same time, there are certain strains and there are certain repossession that is also taking place. And what I hear from this discussion, and thankfully we did this as part of the B2B thematic webinar series, is that you know there is no one size fits all. There is no one solution that can challenge and respond to the dispossession. There needs to be numerous smaller interventions and some smaller initiatives. And the real conflict is between how to tackle the dynamics between the good, evil, and the bad. I mean, sometimes they take over on each other, but then you have to kind of work along those, so respond to the most pressing issues, and then make smaller interventions could be one way to deal with it. And that's a hopeful message that is coming out of your talk. So we are at time, and thank you very much, Amalendu, for bringing a new topic, and starting to kind of have a debate around how vulnerability, viability, processes unfold in places where dispossession is the rule of the day. And we will continue this discussion beyond this thematic webinar. And thanks to the audience also who joined from different parts of the world. And this continues on YouTube, because this recordings are posted on YouTube. The debates continue. So thank you very much once again for making time and bringing your work to for discussion at this forum. Okay, so we'll
Thank
be
you.
in touch.
Thank you.
But thanks everyone.
Thank
Bye
you.
bye.
Thank you so much, Pradeep, for this is an honor and privilege for me to kind of discuss with this audience, informed audience rather.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and I also take this opportunity to invite everyone for the next, edition of the thematic webinar on the 29th of August, which is the last Friday of August. We'll be announcing it very soon. So look forward to seeing you there. Thank you. Thanks very much. Bye bye.